everyone. Welcome to another exciting episode of the Human Weapon System. Today on HWS, we have the great Dr. Sarah Ward, physical therapist for the U.S. Air Force. Before we get into talking about Dr. Sarah and what she does, thanks for coming and thanks for joining us. First, if you like what we're doing, please give us that 5-star review, tickle that bell, a like, whatever it is, no matter on the platform what you're doing. Every little bit helps. And also, I want to say thank you so much to our title sponsor, Play. Our friends Erica and Mark over there have been great with us, especially when I've been helping to build our new performance facility a couple of years ago here for the unit I work for. So for anything you might need for human performance or your gym or just questions in general, talk with Eric and Mark over there. They're outstanding people. You can reach them almost any time of the day. And just the customer service is outstanding. So with that being said, Dr. Sarah Ward, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, same here. So your resume is very distinguished. I'll let you get into that first, but for me, the biggest thing I've always enjoyed, I've been wanting to talk to you for the longest time, is your podcast. Not your typical doctors. So you're one half of that show. Talk to us about that a little bit.
Yeah, so that kind of came to fruition about 3 years ago. Essentially, it was myself and another female coworker in the human performance space, and we really loved what we do. And then, I'm very passionate about the program and the field and kind of everything that it does. And I had kind of scoped out what's out there, and there wasn't any female perspective. And there also at the time was very limited, like team integration perspective. And essentially that was kind of our claim to fame, obviously being females in the field. There's not a ton of us, but you work pretty hard to get there. And then the team integration is essentially my philosophy and like bread and butter for my practice. So yeah, we started it. We had a couple really good seasons, really good on guests. It's at a small hiatus right now, but it was something, I was very passionate about. It was very cup filling. Yeah. So
yeah, it was very good. I learned a lot from it early on as a practitioner here in the tactical field. So thank you for that. If any of those who are interested, you can still find that podcast on any of the major platforms. Again, it's not your typical doctors. I'm telling you, you need to download. It's amazing. The way that Sarah and her co-host play off each other is it'll put a smile on your face day in and day out. So it's just an amazing podcast.
Yeah, so we try we try to be laid back, a little more informal approach to stuff. So we had a good time. It
was great. I got a feeling we're going to have some fun here today too. So, with you on, so far with these past couple of episodes, we've been talking about kind of the return to mission, within the tactical law enforcement and first responder fields. Basically, I kind of brought that up because if any of those who see the episode 1, I still had a nice black eye. I'm still nursing a broken arm right now. I got a nice titanium plate in. And that's what spurred the kind of this subject matter here for these first few episodes. So, with you, Sarah, a little bit, talk to us how you became involved with working with the military, especially as a physical therapist.
Yeah, it's not a super glorious story, to be honest with you. I had a pretty eclectic background. I was actually kind of grew up and lived within an hour or two of a military installation. So was familiar and was kind of, tracking that at the time. They were starting to add civilians and contractors and these type of things. It had always been a goal of mine. Actually, when I was in PT school, you have to do different projects and stuff. And mine was always focused on either pro sports or tactical. So that was kind of always my passion and my thrive. But essentially I had a pretty eclectic background where I jumped around between sports and orthopedics. I had a little dabble in like foreign professional sports for a while. I was a college professor for a while, did some per diem work at a Trauma One center. So I had a pretty eclectic resume at the time. And I actually got recruited on LinkedIn.
Interesting.
The company was really transparent. They're like, we think you're close enough. I was within an hour of a military installation. And they were very transparent. They're like, you're the only one that we can find essentially that has all the credentials that we're looking for that's required for the position. In all honesty, at first I thought it was like a joke. It's like, no way. Are they just like pinging me with my dream job? you know, like, does that really happen? But I went and I interviewed, and I ended up, you know, sliding into the tactical space. I was there for a little under 5 years. Super, super happy, super successful. I joke around all the time and say that that was like the peak of my career. I understand I'm downhill now from there.
I understand that one.
Yeah, but it was super fortunate. So I was with Air Force Spec War for, like I said, just under 5 years. And we did a lot of, it was a tier 2 unit, but we did a lot of tier 1 prep, which was really fun and nice. And just a lot of experience between going out in the field. And just, I really felt at home kind of where I was there. So it was a really great experience. I'm very fortunate. And that actually has kind of pushed me into where I am today. So,
okay. So where are you at today?
So I got recruited for Space Force's Human Performance Initiative. So I'm currently with them. Brand new program. Everybody's working really hard to build it from the ground up. It's a really impressive team. I feel very honored, honestly, to be part of the team over here. Really, everybody's truly like a subject matter expert, which is really, really nice. So we've kind of done a lot of trial and error already, and it's just been a really fun experience. But I've been over here with them for about a year, but they literally just started getting people on the ground about last year. So brand new.
Yeah, very brand new. And for those who don't understand what's going on with the Space Force, it's very experimental with what they're doing with human performance these days. It's a really interesting intersection of bringing in the new ideas that the DoD has learned in the past 20, 25 years with human performance, and also the intersection of bio-wearables and such as well. And it's really going to be interesting to see how this develops over the next few years.
Yeah. That's the one thing that really drew me to the program and the organization to begin with. They were very straightforward that they were looking to be innovative, and they plan on being innovative. Like, they don't, you know, it'll happen, which was really nice and exciting to be part of something like that. Like, you're kind of making history with a whole new branch of service. So I feel very fortunate to be over here in the pile of program managers for sure.
Excellent. Well, congratulations on that. So, so with that being said, so you talk, so without giving too much of what we've kind of done, in HP. So, because you and I, we both come from a similar background with the type of units that we work with. You and I have the same populations. And so, we work on, kind of the point closer to the pointier end of the spear than typical, conventional forces. And so what are some of the, for those out there, what are some of the big lessons learned that you initially learned when you first came into that field with the return to mission process?
Yeah. So, probably the biggest thing is you have to be very comfortable and confident in your skills. Like, I would say it's definitely not a role for a new grad or, somebody who's kind of new to the space. So you really have to trust yourself, limit your imposter syndrome. It always creeps out. I feel like for everybody at every time, it doesn't matter what stage you're in, like imposters. Yeah, it always comes. But if you truly want to take care of people, you really have to kind of go with your gut and rely and work on that. I had worked in integrated settings before and integrated teams before, but not at the level once I was in the spec war unit. Like, that was a whole new level. Like, you're talking to your coworkers multiple times a day. You're having team meetings multiple times a week. Sometimes you'd even see your patients twice a day, depending on what it is. So it's just a higher, way more integrated level than anything I've ever experienced, which I enjoyed. I know that's not for everybody, but I liked it. I liked the challenge. It's definitely important to have the flow and everything with the coworkers too. So I was very fortunate to have a really solid team the first couple of years I was there. Which just, enhances the experience once you get that fluidity kind of with the team and the treatment, the program. So that was really nice, but it's definitely a whole nother level of integration for sure. And then just being an Air Force provider where your only resources are Army resources was probably the biggest challenge. By far.
That's where we're at right now.
It's tough. They don't care about you and why should they, right? We're not their branch service. We don't pay their bills, like, I totally understand. But that's its own set of challenges. So I had to learn how to really network and connect with all the providers around me, try to find a commonality, whatever I needed to do to make the connection happen so we could support the service members, really.
Yeah. you're kind of hitting on a point that I was really hoping that you would kind of bring up, is kind of that difference between operational medicine and traditional medicine. So can yeah, I want to hear that, your perspective on it. Yeah, it's really interesting to hear from different personnel at HP. What's your how would you define operational medicine, and what does it mean to you?
I'm going to try to be polite because military medicine has its own challenges. I think the reason operational medicine and embedded care exists is because of the gaps and the deficits with your traditional or your military medical system.
Yeah.
And it was to the point where people were dying, whether it was dying after transition or, dying out in the field or what have you, or just, we weren't retaining people, but it got to such a high cruciality that something had to be done. So obviously SOCON figured it out first, like a decade ago, and we're always grateful for them and their framework. But that's the biggest thing. It's just another level of care. You were assigned, where I was, I had the same 120 guys. I was very fortunate.
Yep.
I knew every single one of their names. I know who was coming, who was going, if they visited their parents over the weekend. It's just a deeper level of care, and it allows the provider to just do a better job just because you have the rapport there. But in addition, I felt it allowed me to advocate much better, because I knew what somebody needed. Yeah. I could really push in and advocate, but I had the background history, and I have, they would come to me and open up about their trials and tribulations with the MTF or what have you, and their frustrations. Like, none of that was concealed, which I know it's hard with traditional medicine, but you're lucky if you see the same doctor once a year and, there's minimal follow-ups, or you're sending a message through a chat or something. Where this, they could walk right into my office. They eat lunch with me sometimes,
Nice.
And we could talk and soundboard answers or question, whatever they needed. So it's just a different level, but I think it's valuable, and I think it's there for a reason. And I think that's the reason you're seeing more of these embedded programs pop up as well as the years go.
Yeah. And you hit right on that. It's the relationships. And that's the thing I love about being an embedded exercise physiologist with the same 120 guys, right? Is you get to know them, and you can instantly tell, all right, when something's wrong, or if they're having a good day versus having a bad day, just by the mannerisms, because you know them. But it also, a lot of times we don't have the social medicine side of it, psychologists or cognitive psychologists, because there's a shortfall of them in the Air Force. We know that, and so, but that relationship really kind of helps with that, because you can have those conversations and really kind of tap into kind of those soft skills to kind of really help with the mental health side of it as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the true therapists and therapists, they joke around and say your physical therapist turns into your therapist when you see them 3 times a week. Try seeing them twice a day for 5 days a week for 6 months, because that's what my ACLs would do. It was literally I knew everything about them, and it's just a whole different level. I remember distinctly, were we eating lunch or something? I think at one point, I can't remember if it was around a meal or if we were just like, we all went to Starbucks or something to, kind of take a break from the building. But they'd come and get you and be like, hey, Doc, you want to go get, tea? And it's like, yeah, we'll get tea. And I distinctly remember this one time, this operator, and he's like mid-30s, borderline, crusty NCO. And it took me a while to break him down, right? He was one of the ones that would just like hang out in the doorway, but never step in for like a year. And then finally he stepped in and we took care of him. And then, then it's like a waterfall of word of mouth, and you need to go. But I remember we were in line at that Starbucks one day, and he looked at me and he said, I just want you to know that you're the first like non-physical female relationship I've ever had, and I appreciate that, because you're showing me like what normal looks like normal communication. And it almost comes down to that psychosocial, right? They're in this world. They're not around a lot of females. They don't have a lot of mental health support. Like they don't know sometimes what even a normal relationship looks like. So it definitely goes on many different levels other than just caring for their rehab, for sure.
Excellent. I love it. Yeah. It just seeing that all the time. And that actually kind of brings it back to your podcast. One of my favorites, I can't remember of it, but you had, it was the one physical therapist that was talking about, he always gave hugs. I'm not sure.
That was a mental health provider. So he was
that's right. Yes.
Yeah. He's an Air Force officer. He's a licensed clinical social worker. His name's Brock, but he hugs. I love Brock. He hugs everybody.
Yeah, and he had a similar story with that as well on that you mentioned on your podcast. And that's sorry, that just brought that up.
He did, yeah. He had one about like a war story, and the guy hugged him, and he was like, this is the first like normal man-to-man hug. Yeah, yeah. So it's just again, it shows it's across all the disciplines, all the genders. Like it's just such an impactful program, really. Aside from just the access to care,
Yeah. So so keeping it in line with that same thing, right? So you typically ideally, let me take this back. So ideally you want to have, at least in the musculoskeletal domain, is you want a strength coach, EP, paired with a physical therapist, and along with one or two very good ATCs as well. Have you come across in your past, or even currently, have you come across that paradigm at all?
Where we all work together?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah, totally. It's required. It's just kind of required. So what we had set up, obviously, especially for post-surgical or people who were really injured, we were constantly sending modified programming to the coaches. Not that they couldn't do it, but we wanted to make sure they stayed within, surgical restrictions was most of it.
Yeah.
But it was really important to us that the member stays in PT. We don't want to pull them from the group. Right. I'm not really one for, and this might be not a popular opinion, I'm not really one for bridge programs where you're taking everybody that's injured and like setting them to the side and are like, we're going to do everybody, who's normal and ready to go first, and then we'll take care of you in an hour. Like that just was never my vibe for how I practice. So we were always very intentional to keep everybody together in the group. We would just make sure, the member and the physiologist was aware of the modifications when and where, but they were still part of the group. And then, of course, when they get to the part of discharge, lots of communication for handoff on that aspect. But we stayed together. We talked again regularly, daily. Yeah. Another big thing I pushed was mental health. So we were fortunate enough to have a mental health as part of our photo team. We would give them the option, but some people didn't have the option. Like some of it, we could get to a point in rehab and I'm like, listen, this is fear avoidance. So this is a mental block and we're not going to get better at this until you go see somebody else who's not me. In addition to it, I'm not the expert, they are, but we need to get you where you need to go. So I would say probably 80 to 85% of the time, we also included mental health, and it would be the same, whether it's co-visits or, they were doing separate visits, but it was a very blended type of return to duty program. And folks were usually they're always a little hesitant to go say mental health. Typically we'd have to word it, you need a little performance coaching, you need a little performance enhancement, right? You put a different flavor on the same thing and it would be a little more appealing for them to go. But they always came back afterwards and were like, that's what got me, that's what just pushed me over my healing journey. They were always very, very grateful, no matter how much kind of resistant in the beginning, which is really nice. Yeah. So
how often did you have to work around that fear of them coming off flight status? And so for those who don't know about this, typically there's two acronyms called DNIF and DIGNIF. Basically, that means it takes these guys off of flight status. They can't fly anymore. And if they can't do that, they can't do their job. So that is just a fear with that. So, yeah.
Every day, all the time. They would constantly come in. I literally would have the MSD. So the MSD is like the flight surgeon Bible, essentially, of all the codes and if it'll DNIC and if so, for how long away you need to get back. I always had it printed out on my desk, like the most current model, because they changed it every quarter or so. And if I didn't know the answer, we'd sit right through it and, look at the MSD together so that they could make an educated decision was always kind of my approach. I would give them the information. Lots of times I would give them options or resources how to go around that. Pain management, say they wanted to go to a physiatrist, but once you start getting injections and things like that, you're not able to fly. You're pulled off and you're put on DNIC status. So I would give them options like, have you tried battlefield acupuncture or like CSS, like alpha stim therapy, just kind of go over some of the alternatives, options that won't pull you off the flight line, just to make sure they were educated. But that was a constant. I used to have to brief on it actually, pretty regularly, like what will make you DNIF? What does it mean? What's a temporary 72-hour DNIC, with medication changes, stuff like that. So a huge concern pretty regularly, but my stance personally was to really try to educate them so they could just make an informed decision themselves.
Excellent. Yeah. So within that, trying to get guys back, back on the flight status, or even just regular return to mission status. What? And this is going to probably be a loaded question, but what kind of metrics did you look at, and what type of KPIs did you use?
So we were kind of free range the first couple years. What? We were able to do what we wanted, and then the certain MatchCom that I was under did kind of put out standards that they were looking for that we had to go into. So when we were free range, it was kind of a combination of what all of us felt comfortable for going back. I know a lot of our coaches like to do, FMS and a couple other, I'm blanking on the other one.
Sorry. Yeah.
No, it's okay. I think it's the RCS stuff. Is it RCS?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Sounds familiar. Yeah.
Like the rotary stability stuff.
Yeah.
So our coaches would focus a lot around that. Mine was pretty injury dependent. I actually love the Y balance. It's clean. It's simple. It just is what it is, right? You're going to get a number on this side and a number on this side, and we're going to work from there. I liked that it wasn't, like a graph with a table you had to go to. The operators liked that they saw numbers, and then when they retest, obviously they could see their own growth or, improvement in front of their eyes. So Y balance is a pretty easy go-to. To me, I did that a lot. I did like the 3 hop single leg test is really good, super valid. And again, those are really just symmetry, return to duty type metrics. And then depending on how severe the injury was, like if we're talking TBI or major surgery, there were a lot of duty specific stuff that we would do. So we would do mock sims that they would have to go through and do. I had a lot of shoulder and hand surgeries where we would do mock shooting quals for M9 and to make sure that they were up to speed and stuff. So just kind of depended on the injury. I would tweak it a little bit here and there to make it more like duty ergonomic specific.
Check. Sorry. Yes. Falling into so what were some of the most common injuries that you came across? And even like now, Alex, I'm kind of curious. Let's talk about both. When you were with Abspec War versus what you're seeing now within Space Force.
Yeah. So at Spec War, 100% rotator cuffs, low backs. And then you get a tossle in of your knee and ankle. Like we had a handful of ankle reconstructions, handful of ACL reconstructions. They weren't the primitive ones. I would say rotator cuffs by 100%. I mean, but we would push out surgeries. I don't know. Our NCOs looking to transition towards the end like crazy. Those were pretty. And then TBIs were huge. Actually, we had just a lot of TBIs between training or now that the guys that were 20 years in, now that they actually have embedded care, we start talking about their symptoms and realize they have a TBI from 15 years ago. So a lot of back management, but a lot of TBIs between different explosions and rollovers and a lot of jumping incidents if they were at a jump unit, things of that sort. Space Force is a little bit different. So just a totally different population and different jobs, right? So they're still fighting wars, but it's in a much different capacity. And, I say this all the time. I didn't have an idea of like really what Space Force did until I got here. And now that I'm here, like, man, I wish they could talk about it. That's like, I just wish they could talk about it. It's so important. They're very busy. But it's just such a high level of importance of the stuff that they do. So ours predominantly over here is we have a lot of neck and back. And a lot of it has to do, honestly, with the skiff conditions. But right now it's pretty heavy with neck and back in terms of the physiological stuff. A little bit of elbows, a little bit of hands, but a lot of it's neck and back, honestly.
So, so with that being said, so that's very similar to what I've been hearing with, pilots, in the new Gen 5, airframes. And so they are making adjustments to the cockpit for that. Are they making internal adjustments to the workspaces due to the kind of similar responses?
We're trying to, and it's funny you say that because one of our partners we talk to very regularly is the Craft program. So we love them and their director.
We probably have a lot of people in common over there.
Yeah. Shout out to Colonel Pricemore, and she's my favorite. But, Yeah, and we've gone over all that a lot, you know, because again, you think Space Force, you think there's not these similarities with the operator groups, and I'm like, they're very similar. It's very similar to the sitting situations of pilots, and then the physical stress, obviously not, but it's different. It's cognitive stress. So they're at the same high level as an operator in terms of stress. It's just on their brain instead of their bodies. So they're actually very compatible or comparable populations when you look at it like that. But so part of our program is that kind of pushing in. We do ergonomic assessments and kind of educate leadership. A lot of it, of course, comes down to money. You know, if they have funding, they kind of change out things here and there. But we're making headway for sure. We're trying really hard, teaching the basics on, you know, just little adjustments you can make here and there, whether it's to the chair or to the table. But we are helping to do that. One of the things I like about the Space Force program that I do feel is pretty different compared to the other programs is we get cleared to push into the skiffs. So we literally push into the skiffs. Yep. We bring our care directly to them. Literally.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really nice. So I can see the workspace. I go in, I look at the workspace. Okay. I can actually help them. We're getting equipment cleared, bringing certain health and wellness tools in to kind of help. So that's been a huge benefit over here that I do think really distinguishes this branch's embedded care to the others, because they recognize, look, access to care is an issue for everybody, right? Ops tempo's crazy. You can't leave the skiff, especially skiff. You're talking 12, 15-hour shifts. You can't leave. You know, that's just the nature of the job and the duty. So we fixed access to care by just throwing us in there instead.
Yeah. No, that's highly important. I mean, because that's one of the issues that we have locally is because we have an area of our facility that is secured and you can't bring certain pieces of certain devices and pieces of equipment, especially if it's wireless, Bluetooth, or anything like that, just due to the policies of being overseas. And so that limits the ability to be able to do certain things as well. So that's I'm really happy to hear that.
Yeah, it's been a work in progress. We've had to be really creative how to get certain pieces of equipment, and honestly, and you're talking small spaces too. I can't drag in a freezer, an ice machine, a game ready, a hydroculator. I can't drag that on to a skip. A, there's no room. B, there's just those hookups don't exist. So you have to get really creative, find equipment. You know, luckily we found a piece of equipment that's all those things into one. So nice. It's just really trying to figure out what'll work in those situations, and then piling everything in the corner.
Yeah,
so that it's there.
So this is just me being kind of curious. Have you ever done dry needling right there in the middle of the skiff?
Oh yeah.
Oh, nice.
100%. Yeah, we had this one area, and for whatever reason they had a weight bench there. It's still there. Like it just lives there. I think maybe one officer at one point would bench, free weights on his lunch is what they told me, but then they just never moved the bench. So I was like, right? Leave the bench. Like I can work with a bench. It's a little bit hard on the floor, but I can work with a bench. So that situation was a little more, we used the bench. We were able to get done what we needed to get done. But yeah, we just throw, I mean, honestly, we chuck everything in a backpack. And kind of backpack it in and out outside of the stuff that we get permission to leave. So,
right. Oh, that is so cool. I mean, I love that. I love that. So, I mean, I think you're kind of hitting on it. So, you're able to bring the access to care, closer to them, like you're just saying. But what are some of the other challenges that you have right now versus to what you were when you were with your previous unit?
Yeah, so the access to care is good, but with that comes a lot of paperwork, right? So a lot of it is just being a brand new program, coming out, even going out to Air Force, bases to get support, whether it be for credentialing or whatever we need to get our program up and running, MOUs, things of that sort, just the paperwork side of things that it just has to exist, has probably been the biggest thing, because they look at you and they're like, well, you're not Air Force or you're not Army, and it kind of goes back to, that's why I was very fortunate for the location that I'm in out here. I had experience because I was an Air Force near an Army installation. So all my MOUs and all my credentialing went through that. And that's kind of the area I'm at now is my nearest option is an Army installation for those things. So I was very grateful to have that experience, but it's a challenge. You know, you have to sit down with people that you're wasting your time in their mind. You know, I literally have had people sit down and they're like, I think your program's a waste of money. You know, like it's just, they have their own opinions and they don't want to help for whatever reason, even though at the end of the day, I feel like we all have the same goal, or we should have the same goal of helping the service vendors, you know, have a quality of life, whether it's in or outside of service. So that's probably been the biggest thing. It was expected, but probably the biggest thing there. And then, you know, it's just finding the right fits. Because like I said, Space Force was very intentional that they want like true SMEs, and they want people that are going to stay because we're building a program. We don't want people that are going to jump in and out, only stay a year or two. So Space Force did do a really good job offering permanent positions, you know, with enticing salaries to kind of get the right people. But even part of that, you know, you have to filter through and try to find the right fit. So that's always a challenge in itself, especially because, you know, human performance is kind of nichey. I hate to say it, but it is kind of nichey. There are certain personalities that flourish with the populations versus others. So that's always a challenge in itself too. But we've been fortunate. All the leadership seems very supportive. It's very rare that we get a Space Force leader that doesn't support the program, which is great because Spec War was like 50-50. I'm sure you guys have had your experience, but it's about 50-50. You'd get a good commander, then you get, you know, somebody who didn't care, and then it kind of tousled back and forth. Where Space Force has a really high support on the leadership side, like all the way up the chain, which is really nice. And they seem to value the program. So
yeah, it's interesting you bring that up because I'm starting. Yes, exactly. I've been through that myself. It's interesting to see kind of that, at least with our Spec War population, is the gap. It's like the younger, the new generation. They're going through the pipeline with HP, but that in the middle, a lot of your mid to senior level NCOs didn't have it, and so there's still some are still being sold on it. Others, okay, I know what I know. I'm going to do my thing. Versus those, and then all of a sudden you've got the senior level, you know, the long in the tooth, those getting ready to end career. They understand the value of it, and it's an interesting paradigm compared to what you're just talking about right now. And so, I love to. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, well, and we had that in Spec War too, for sure. Like I said, the crusty NCO that hangs out in the doorway for a year, you know, like you won't touch me, but then you end up breaking the wall. Yeah, that's been good. And honestly, it's part of like my intro brief out here now that I give to units. Because it's one of the first thing that comes up, you know, is what do these people in the middle do? So I let them know, like, we understand that there's people who haven't had the service and there's going to be reactive care. As much as we want to be a proactive program, it just is what it is. We're a brand new program. So, you know, still come to us. We'll help you out reactively with the long-term goal, as with all of these, is to be a proactive entity. So.
Excellent. So with you being kind of on the front edge of this with, you know, in the Space Force, kind of really help building the program and, you know, lessons learned. Where do you kind of see it going here in the next couple of years?
Yeah, I do think they're going to set a standard, or I hope it sets a good example for bringing care into SCIFs. I know that's not the case everywhere. We're very fortunate that we're a small branch of service. But I think the data points and the retention and just the feedback we're going to get from that is going to speak for itself. Hopefully, we have a large investment in trying to figure out what works wearable wise. So I do think a couple years down the road, we'll have that figured out, whatever that looks like. We have a lot of interest in that, you know, DoD wide. So I think that'll have an effect depending on what our outcome is, in that sense, which will be really nice because there's a lot of stuff out in the market, you know, some works, some doesn't, some half works. So I think figuring out, you know, what works and kind of sharing it will be really good. But I do see our program growing. We actually already are growing. So even just the teams we have on the ground now, there's 7 teams now in the country.
Excellent. Wow.
Yeah, that we're growing. So we're already adding some teams in the future, and the more, like I said, leadership gets involved and the more that they verbalize, what they want, where, we just see our program growing, which is really exciting. Really exciting. And we're hoping to make some real impressions and foundations in the benefit of like prevention and skill building, because that's kind of our bread and butter. So we really go in, just 2 weeks ago, I did a lunch and learn on stress management for one of our operational units. And literally our whole brief, we do the normal education. This is stress. This is why it's bad. It's the cortisol. This is why cortisol bad. And it's good sometimes use stress. We always go over use stress. We like to let them know there's a balance, obviously. But then we focus on hands-on stuff. And this is something that we started to do in Spec War, but I don't know if it just wasn't digest or if it wasn't asked for, if they didn't realize it was a thing. That I really like that Space Force is doing is it's almost not mandated, but it's really our theme is like skills. So if we're giving you a brief, you're walking away with something. You're either walking away with a physical tool or a tool that we've taught you. So, we went through and did breathing techniques. That day we happened to focus on the physiological side to go over like how to manually CO2 dump, which was really cool. We bring in breathing lights and breathing necklaces and acupuncture mats and just, kind of give them options and things to take care of. So I do think the more we get out there with all these skill building sessions and once there's themes and people take these as it becomes a habit, right? If you keep hearing it, it becomes a habit and a true like lifestyle change. I think in a couple years, we'll be able to see, if that truly sunk in as lifestyle changes, which is what our goal is. So I see that as a positive, but I do think that'll, we'll have a result of that in a couple years as well.
Excellent. I'd love to hear that. So, well, that's excellent. So, I mean, with this, there's just so much to cover and just so little time. So you're getting towards the apex of your career. Definitely don't agree that you said that you've hit the apex already. You're on the downside. I actually think you're in the exciting end of it right now. That's actually why I quit the university and took the position over here, is that the opportunity to stand up an HP program, from the ground up. That's every HP professional's dream, right? To kind of do that, and so with the next bench of physical therapists, HP professionals coming up, what are some of the what are a couple nuggets of advice that you would give them, whether they go into the tactical field, work with law enforcement, first responders, or just stay in athletics?
Yeah, I do have a lot of people reach out, whether it be on LinkedIn or they'll catch me in a conference, and I'm always open, especially if I have time, like come eat lunch with me, ask me all the questions. So if you ever see me at a conference or, you want to ping me on LinkedIn, feel free. It doesn't bother me at all. I had mentors, obviously my whole career, and I'm very grateful for them. Even if you just want to, ask somebody like, and ask me anything, do whatever you would like. But my biggest thing is there's definitely certain like skills that I feel like DoD looks for. So I do let them know on a physical therapist aspect, certain certifications that'll help them be a little more enticing in the process, whether it be dry needling or, BFR, just kind of basic stuff like that. Obviously having a board specialty helps, sports or orthopedics, volunteering, finding, you'll be surprised, if you can contact, or if you know somebody who knows somebody at your local military installation, be really surprised. Some are pretty easy to go in and shadow, even if it's just for a day. Anything to kind of get your foot in the door, for sure. Conferences are always really good. But the biggest thing is just network. I tell them to network, try to find people who know people through people, or LinkedIn's really great because it'll show you like, here's somebody you're connected to from your PT school, but here's like the 500 other people that person's connected to.
Yes.
So different ways to slip in, but definitely the shadowing is huge, and getting, the more appealing certifications to DoD are probably the two biggest touch points. And then I always, say, kick your resume to me. I'm happy to look it over and give you some feedback. So always, to have someone to peek, another set of eyes is always great too, for sure.
And also, kind of caveat off that too, there is a particular process to get hired on, at least, in the DoD as a physical therapist, whether it's for the or not, I'd like to take that back, for the U.S. government, whether it's DoD, FBI, Border Patrol. You just got to go to usajobs.gov and you can search there on a daily basis. The listings are changing all the time.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that when we start looking at these permanent government positions, they are really getting closer to matching what physical therapists make in the civilian sector as well, which is really good. So it's just something to consider if any of our audience members wants to go into that field. And if you want more information, you can reach out to either Sarah or me, and we can go with that from there. But
yeah,
man,
absolutely.
Sarah, this is just amazing. At 40 minutes, just like your podcast, this 40 minutes just flew by. Yeah, so it's kind of got to start cutting it short. But before we depart, do you have any last words that you'd like to say, or impart us with?
I will say what I always say to everybody: make time for your wellness, so you don't have to make time for your illness later on. So always have wellness in the forefront. Take a few minutes a day. I always tell people, I usually end all my conversations, especially if I'm in a skiff, get outside today, even if it's just for 5 minutes. It makes huge impacts on your health and wellness. A little bit better if it's during the sunlight, but we'll take what we can get. Fresh air is very valuable. So always just take a few minutes for your wellness. You'll thank yourself later on, because then you have less illness to deal with in your future. So that's kind of our claim to fame.
Excellent. Well, Sarah, thank you so much for your time. And everyone out there, thank you for joining us for this episode of the HWS. And thank you to our title sponsors over at Play. If you're interested in looking at their products, go to their website at www.plae.com. That's plae.com. Thanks so much for your time. See you on the next episode of the Human Weapon System. Take care.